Ladies and gentlemen, once in a while a watch crosses our bench that stops us in our tracks. A watch that carries so much history and meaning that we need to take care with every touch, every decision. And today we have such a watch. Arthur Parker, a young man preparing for his service in the First World War, purchased this watch sometime around 1914. This watch, now 110 years old, has stayed in Arthur's family, passed from father to son. Arthur's grandson contacted Gentleman's Watch Services in the hope that this watch could be restored so that it could be passed to Arthur's great-grandson in running order. No time to waste, let's get on with it. There's no opening slot in the bezel, and it's looking very tight, so we shall use a sharp blade. No twisting at all, just allow the wedge shape of the blade to do its work. And there we go. Hands off now with some plastic to protect the dial. The surface is very robust but prone to cracking if too much force is applied. The enamel dial is showing some minor damage, but not too badly. The great thing about enamel dials is you can just drop them into denture cleaning solution to remove all signs of dirt. Unless, that is, the dial has printed markings rather than enameled ones, then any sort of liquid would be an absolute disaster. These markings look like they are printed. Let's assume that's the case and not risk it. We do actually have a special two-step process for cleaning dials with liquid that we've refined over the years and will share with you here. Get your notepads out. Here we go. Step 1. Attempt to clean the dial. Step 2. Instantly make it much worse, regret and misery. There are no maker's markings on the movement at all, apart from a single solitary number 2 stamped on the keyless works side. This movement was made by Beagle & Sear, located in Tramelin, the same location indicated by the case hallmark. Beagle movements were used in watches made by the Rolex Watch Company that branded them Marconi, Unicorn and Rolco. These movements also appeared in some Ingersoll-branded watches, and maybe others. With the movement out of its case, we can remove the balance wheel to save it from the inevitable slipping screwdrivers and whatnot. Pallet fork looks to be in good condition and everything as it should be. We'll also let the power down and remove the pallet fork. There are those who believe that the symptom of a non-running watch, the watch being fully wound and not running, is actually the cause of the problem. This is not the case. Winding a watch, even fully, does not break it. Taking the pallet fork out now is a safety net, belt and braces, fail safe against there being any power left in the mainspring. Not seeing any catastrophic failures or damage, feeling hopeful. We shall evacuate the R-wheel, minute wheel and cannon pinion. "110 years ago, a worker in Tramelin, Switzerland had a job polishing the heads of screws that would only ever be seen by the occasional watchmaker. Another mirror-polished screw for the yoke spring this time. The NASA Orbital Debris Program Office recently produced a report stating that yoke springs make up 18.75% of all orbital debris. Apparently, after a few orbits, they rain back down to Earth, which is why they sometimes reappear, weeks after first pinging out of the movement. The yoke is released now, and we are able to quickly whip out the winding pinion and clutch. And while we are on this side of the watch, let's remember to remove the lower cap jewel for the balance wheel. We'll deposit the jewel in some heptane and move over to the other side of the movement to free the setting lever. As we all know, the first rule of watchmaking is no Fight Club jokes. Second rule is the crown wheel screw is usually, but very much not always, reverse threaded. Assume nothing, and if it feels tight, give it a little go the opposite way. Same with the ratchet wheel, usually not reverse threaded, but sometimes it is. Be careful out there. The click screw and click itself have an appointment with the parts tray. The watchmaker's special stick will keep the click spring in line. The barrel bridge has been divested of its parts and may now be removed. Escape wheel cock is top of the list. Common sense would say that having just one pivot to worry about should make fitting these easy, but we always struggle with these. Train of wheel bridge screws are now loosened. You know the drill. Check that there isn't a sneaky short screw before moving them away. Although we seem to remove parts in just seconds, in reality, every gear tooth and pinion leaf is closely inspected. Unfortunately, our 3-hour-long masterpiece video titled "Man Looks Closely at Watch Parts" was a commercial and critical disaster, so rapid edits it is. Let's pop open the mainspring barrel and see what's to be found. A nice carbon steel mainspring. It does look lovely, but its spring has sprung many years ago and it will need to be replaced. This isn't looking too bad. Just a 3 out of 10 on the Gentleman's Watch Services filth scale. But still worth a little pre-clean before the spin around in the cleaning machine. And the last job for disassembly is the balance wheel. This one has a friction-fit stud. Back onto the movement to give us solid foundation, we shall hold the spoke of the balance wheel clear of the stud and pop it out. That was painless. Excellent. Onwards. The two ridiculously small screws are looking in reasonable condition. There's a small chip on the jewel, but we'll clear at the working surface. All is good. While the watch parts are in the cleaning machine, let's have a little look at the original owner of the watch, Arthur Parker. Before the war, Arthur worked as a farm wagoner. It was his experience and love for horses that made the Army Veterinary Corps the natural home for his wartime service. Although by the First World War, cavalry warfare was largely an anachronism, horses were vital to the war effort, fulfilling every transport role for people, supplies, equipment, and weapons. Arthur spent 4 years with the army in France. It can't have been an easy time for someone dedicated to the welfare of animals. After the war, his work with horses continued with employment as a bloodstock breeder and even some time racing horses in New Zealand. In time, Arthur's watch will be passed to his great-grandson, who is currently a medic in the British Army. We are sure Arthur would have been proud of his family's service and perhaps a little amazed his watch is still ticking. Everything is lovely and clean. Let's get this watch back together and ticking. We have a concern that we may fall at the first hurdle. This little nub in the mainspring barrel looks like it's going to get in the way when we push the new mainspring into place. Luckily, we have a strategy and a plan. Hope for the best and trust in dumb luck. Here we go. And there it is, exactly as we thought. All is not lost. It gives an excuse to get the mainspring winders out. When all goes well, mainspring winders are great, but there are often issues. The winder arbor is often too wide or too narrow. The spring won't engage with the hook, or the winder barrel isn't the right size. They can be useful tools, but sometimes it's more straightforward and more successful to just fit the spring by hand. In this case, the winder was perfect. Excellent! Mainspring is in. Let's quickly proceed to the next problem. The end loop on the mainspring is much smaller than the arbor, and it's sitting a long way from the hole in the barrel. This really isn't going to work. Holding the arbor in a pin vise will give us the control we need to plop the arbor into position. A little finagling and we are in. Barrel lid next, gentle push and wait for it. Click. The mainspring barrel is the engine of the watch. The arbor must be free to move, a critical check. With the barrel done, we can move on to the balance assembly, cap jewels and whatnot. We spend quite a lot of time with our nose hovering over pots of heptane solvent, so we thought a look at the health effects was in order. According to the New Jersey Department of Health, chronic health effects include reduced memory and concentration, sleep disturbance, and reduced coordination. It seems inhaling heptane is pretty much like hitting 50 years old, but without an overwhelming urge to purchase a lifted Silverado. The scratch on the underside of the balance cock was left by a watchmaker who was cleaning watch parts in batches, marking them so they didn't lose track of which part belonged to which movement. The two ridiculously small screws found on older balance assemblies often get damaged by repeated repairs and services. Always pleased to see them in such good condition. We shall now place a drop of oil that will remain in place for a few 100 million ticks and tocs until the next service. And now the friction fit stud. This movement is otherwise of a perfectly reasonable quality. The designer really did blot their copybook by including such an abomination. Closing the hairpin and boot completes the assembly. A little epilarm on the pallet jewels and escape wheel, and it's time to really get this movement back together, starting with the setting lever. Fitting the setting lever first means it can be held flush to the main plate, reducing the risk of cross-threading. Let's put the escape wheel back in. Here's the plan. Spend a long time making sure it's sitting in the bottom jewel, then immediately knock it out with the escape wheel cock. This cannot be rushed or forced. Trust the process and keep everything super gentle. Calm acceptance is the only way, is what we keep telling ourselves. But on the inside, we are a seething ball of rage. Come on, just bloody go in. Puff of air. Lovely, that's looking good. And of course, watchmaker's special stick while we fix everything in place. Fourth wheel next. It has a long pivot that holds the second hand. On some movements, at least fitted before the escape wheel cock, we do hope we haven't made a tactical error. That is a relief. The other wheels will plop into position with no drama. Just a little lubrication for the second wheel bottom pivot. Train of wheels, bridge, 3 pivots need to line up at the same time. No problems at all. Lovely! And, of course, watchmaker's special stick to keep everything stable. Without the stick, it's so easy for a pivot to pop out of position and then get squished. We shall prepare the way for the mainspring barrel with a little HP 1300. And now the barrel bridge, all very straightforward. Pick up a little blue grease for the crown wheel. Crown wheel in, bit more blue grease, followed by the crown wheel core and its screw that, as we all remember, is reverse threaded lefty-tighty. While the click spring is relatively diminutive and lightweight in comparison to the more frightening yoke spring, don't be fooled. They are escape artists looking for any excuse to disappear. Click is persuaded into place and then a little lubrication. Ratchet wheel negotiates its position between the crown wheel and click. Often this part is engraved with the watch's brand, but in this case just a generic Swiss made and 15 joules. Pallet fork, very delicate, great care. The pallet fork's job is to stop time happening all at once, locking the train of wheels and only allowing the mainspring power to be released in discrete packets. The quantizing of time is at the foundation of much of physics and engineering, so don't underestimate this little fellow. Let's add some power to this watch and check the pallet fork. Those little kicks as the fork jumps away from the tweezers are what keeps the balance wheel oscillating. Special lubrication for the pallet jewels, a non-Newtonian fluid colored yellow, the same color as custard, which is also a non-Newtonian fluid. We nearly forgot the cap jewel, the last part before we can fit the balance and see what we had. Starting to get excited. We have to plonk this into place without smearing the oil drop. Ready, 3, 2, 1, plonk. And, at last, the balance wheel. We're keeping a close eye on the pivot through the cap jewel. As long as we can see the pivot and we don't do anything silly, nothing can go wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a runner. We'll lubricate all the train of wheels jewels, top and bottom. Return of the blue grease can only mean one thing. We're onto the keyless and motion works. Winding pinion, blue grease front and back, then the clutch. Yoke is put into position and fixed with its screw. You may remember we mentioned there was something a little unusual about the keyless works on this watch. There's no setting lever spring. The click when switching from winding to hand setting is provided by the tooth on the setting lever. And now we shall prepare the watch for the return of the motion works with a little light lubrication. The intermediate wheel is returned with its polished screw. Cannon pinion next needs to be fitted before the minute wheel. Minute wheel and hour wheel complete the set. The dial washer keeps the hour wheel correctly seated under the dial. Talking of the dial, we're going to give it the lightest clean. It looks quite good to the naked eye, and the printed indices are probably water soluble. We're not going to risk doing anything catastrophic. This crystal has reached the end of its service. These early acetate crystals, yellow and crazed with age and need replacing. All sorts of dirt and old glue here. Let's find a good fit crystal. Then we'll clean everything in acetone. This ultraviolet setting glue is the best choice for this application. We'll let the perfect combination of surface tension and viscosity flow the glue into the clean channel. This is as satisfying to do as it is to watch. The new crystal will really lift the watch while the glue is curing. Let's get the movement back in the case. Hands next. Look at that. A running second hand. Very satisfying. The hands were pretty rusty. We managed to get most of it off with a gentle polish, looking much better. Rather than use a press, we shall hand fit the bezel. Silver is quite soft, and we want to feel what's happening. This is looking great. Let's get this watch on a strap. If you have a watch that needs restoring, repairing, or servicing, check out the Gentleman's Watch Services website. There's a link in this video's description. And here we are. It's been tested on the wrist for a couple of days, running consistently to within a couple of minutes, perfect for occasional wear, and ready for the next generation most gratifying. Right, that's it. I trust you have a marvelous day in all departments.